Thanks, Ross. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Greater Manchester briefing, joined today by Sir Richard Lees. Sir Richard and I have just attended a meeting of the Greater Manchester COVID Emergency Committee. I thought it was very important to keep our focus on what's happening throughout this period, and we'll update you shortly on the latest case numbers. But of course, this presents an opportunity to comment on the unfolding situation in Afghanistan and its potential implications for Greater Manchester. And I'll say something about that after Richard has spoken. So thank you to all of you for your time this afternoon and for joining us. Without further ado, I will hand over to Richard.
Thanks, Andy. We're going to go through the normal slides. If we can put them up, that'd be great. Thanks. Okay, so if you look right at the top, the overall Greater Manchester figure, you see it is now been stable for around about 3 weeks. There are up and downs in all of the districts. I think over the last 7 days, 5 up, 5 down. But overall, the figures seem to have stabilised at a relatively high level. I think one thing to say about this is probably the first week that now incorporates the full impacts of the unlocking that took place, the opening up that took place a few weeks ago. And it would suggest that at least for the all ages, that opening up has not had a significant impact on the figures other than perhaps preventing them going down by a little bit more. If we turn to the over 60s figure, though, which is the next slide on the table, you will see there that there has been, although it's significantly less than it was 3 weeks ago, that there has been a significant increase compared to a week ago. Again, that's pretty much across the piece. We are talking about much smaller figures overall having an impact around this. Not quite sure if there are any particular underlying reasons. Again, the opening up is likely to have had a bigger impact on this age group than other age groups. There is quite a possibility that the impact of vaccinations is beginning to fade. It's not as strong as it was, but it's still not turning into people being hospitalised or becoming critically ill in certainly the way they were back in January, February, March, and we'll see that later on. If we turn to the next one, which is to look at the heat map, you see that overall you've got that decline in cases compared to 4 weeks ago. You see it is still very much in those 16 to 29, 30 to 44-year-old age groups, and it does decline quite sharply as you go up the age groups, which I think is a relatively positive story out of that. If we do move to the next one now, this is some cause for concern. We've been really running at a regular 0.2% for care homes over a very long period of time. Now 0.6%, which is an increase. Again, you only need a relatively small number of cases at this end of the scale to get that sort of increase. And to put it in perspective, the peak earlier in the year was 2.6%, so we're still some way behind that. Vaccination rates in care homes are very high now, and they are increasing amongst care home staff as well. So this is not out of control, but something clearly we'll keep an eye on. Turning to the next one, which is the hospital slide. And this, I think, evidences what I was saying earlier, is that the high case rate isn't turning into high incidences of hospitalisation. You see that overall admissions have gone down quite significantly. Inpatient diagnosis is pretty stable, but overall the number of beds occupied has gone down. And more importantly, the number of people in ICU beds has also gone down as well. Again, this tends to be the older age of the under 60s, but tends to also still be people who have not been vaccinated are the people who are ending up being hospitalised. It's also something that I've said probably every time I've done one of these now for probably getting on for 2 months, is that every part of the health system continues to be under severe pressure. We had a paper this morning that looked at that and showed it's not just A&E, and A&E is under pressure. The acuity of the people presenting at an A&E warrants them being there. So this is not people turning up with a cut finger. It is people who have cases that certainly need the triage and assessment that you get at A&E. But you've got similar pressures with, actually, just say on A&E, the overall number is not the issue. It is that the level of acuity is greater than we would normally get. But you've got similar pressures at GP practices, in optometry, in dentistry, in community pharmacy, in care. Every part of the system is feeling this pressure. It takes us to the last slide, which is the vaccination slide. You can see that for first dose, we're now at 77% for all adults, 67% with second vaccination. The conversion rate at the moment from first to second is round about 92.5%. We're still trying to get that up to the 95%, which is our target. And we're still aiming, and it's now looking by the end of October will be the end of the first round programme before we move fully to boosters. We're still aiming to get that all adult figure up to 85% with 2 doses. That's the target, clearly a way to go. And we do still have some issues in some parts of the conurbation where getting people to be vaccinated is hard work. So the efforts will continue, and again with the aim of getting those figures up to 85% overall, because the evidence is very, very clearly that double vaccination does reduce the risk of serious illness, does reduce the risk of hospitalisation, and does reduce transmission. Just final thought on this is that planning is now well advanced for boosters that we expect to start in September alongside flu vaccination. So the mass vaccination programme is going to continue and probably will become a regular feature of life for perhaps years rather than simply for this winter. I'll finish there, Andy.
Many thanks, Richard. And just to say to colleagues, Richard probably has to leave us not long after 30:30 today. So if there are any questions related to what you've just heard or health in more general, then perhaps bear that in mind and maybe make that known to Ross, I think, if you want to ask your questions. I'll just turn, if I can, to the international situation. Obviously, we've all been taken aback by the speed of events in Afghanistan. Very worrying events that we're seeing on our television screens. And certainly it suggests a failure of intelligence on the part of various Western powers. I have concerns about the approach that was announced by the US government yesterday and what that might mean now for the humanitarian crisis in the country. Now, as ever, Greater Manchester doesn't look away. We will always play our part, and in fact, we are already playing our part in stepping up to dealing with that crisis. But there is a but in that Greater Manchester has always played more than its part when we look at areas across the country when it comes to matters of asylum. Over the last 20 years or so, we have taken around 15% of the overall number of asylum seekers, or the Home Office has dispersed that number of people here. Probably more accurate to say. And we had a discussion today at the committee as to how we will continue to play our part, but in a way in which is sustainable for everybody and is coordinated across the country, because we don't believe the current approach is sustainable, with the Home Office currently placing people in hotels at very short notice, giving late notification to our local authorities, and currently working on a list of 20 locations, 20 city locations around the country. We do not believe that that is a fair approach. We don't think it's fair for the people who are being placed in those hotels at short notice, but nor for the places which are receiving those people. It doesn't work well for anybody. And that's why we believe it can't be the basis on which we go forward from here, given the pressures on the asylum system. So the shared view from Greater Manchester today was that we need a new approach, one that has to be a coordinated approach, a shared approach across the country. And we believe there are three important principles that should underpin that approach as we look to obviously deal with the situation in Afghanistan and our obligations there to provide safety for people, but also the numbers who continue to come into the country by other routes. We can't see these as separates, and we need a coordinated approach across all of it. And the three principles are these: that firstly, the whole approach to asylum needs to be coordinated on a cross-departmental basis, obviously with the Home Office, but working with the other departments that are involved, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the Ministry of Defence, and of course, Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So there needs to be a coordinated approach across all government departments. That takes us to the second principle, which is that there should be equal funding for all people, regardless of which route or which scheme they're coming under. At present, that isn't the case. We saw through the Syrian resettlement programme that the people coming on that route attracted a higher level of funding, and that's been true also of Afghan resettlement. That isn't a sustainable approach. The funding has to be equalised across the board, and that's certainly something that the Local Government Association have said in recent days. The third is perhaps the most important, and it's something that Greater Manchester has repeatedly raised now over many, many years. And that is, we can't just have this voluntary approach where some local authorities try to do the right thing and step forward and others don't. And what that leads to is a disproportionate burden being carried by some parts of the country. We've now hit a point where we believe all local authority areas must step forward or be required to step forward, so that we can make this a manageable situation across the country as a whole. So that was very much the unanimous feeling at our meeting this morning. In summary, again, we will always play our part, and indeed we are already playing our part. It's what Greater Manchester has always done, and what we will always do. But it has to be done on a much fairer basis than the one we've seen in recent times, and particularly in very recent times, where we've seen a haphazard approach to these things, which simply will not work for anybody. So that's our clear view. Wanted to communicate it to you at the start of this briefing today. Ross, I will hand back to you, and just with that warning again that Richard May will have to leave us shortly after past.
Yep, I think the best thing to do is if colleagues in the media who want to ask Richard a question could raise their hand in the first instance. I've already had one or two people get in touch. So I know Jen at the MEN would like to ask Richard a question. I think also ask another question later on. Let me just unmute your Jen, you should be able to switch on your camera and open your microphone now. If you just say who you are and where you're from and your question, please.
Hi, yeah, it's Jen at the MEN. It was a question to both Richard and Andy. On your comments around asylum dispersal, I look back to see what we did on the Syrian refugee programme, and I think I'm right in saying that Greater Manchester's frustrations around the asylum programme played out then, and there was some delay to taking significant numbers of Syrian refugees while those kind of conversations were had with government about asylum dispersal. Is Greater Manchester saying that that you won't take any Afghani refugees until that asylum situation or dispersal situation is reformed, or is it more that you just want to see this entire thing sorted out, but you will still take Afghan refugees if you're asked to do so? And that was obviously a question to both, because I realised that it's kind of up to individual local authorities to an extent, isn't it, what you do? And also just a health question again to Richard. You talked about extreme pressures on the health system as a result of all kinds of different things happening at the same time. Is there anything that you specifically want from government in order to address that? Because we've had weeks and weeks and weeks of this now, haven't we? And we're now heading into the autumn when it could get worse again.
Richard, do you want to take that one first? Both questions for you.
That's what basically has been done over the last few weeks. That every bit of the system has put together programs, mental health, the hospitals, primary care, about what we can do to try and manage and deal with the demand that's within the system at the moment. Some of that has got resource asks. An example of that is something that was put to NHS England a few weeks ago about accelerator programme for elective recovery. So yes, there are resource asks around this, but based very clearly on delivery business plans across the system. So the answer, are there asks? Yes, there are. Do we need more resources to try and tackle this and not go backwards? Yes, we do. If I just make my comment on the asylum seekers from Afghanistan, is that they're on their way. We're expecting planes to be landing any moment, and no, we're certainly not going to turn our back on those people. But what we are going to do is to continue to make the case that actually, that if we are really a caring country, we need to make sure we put the proper resources and systems in to be able to support these people very, very quickly, get them out of hotels and get them into homes. So no, we're definitely not going to be refusing to take people, but we'll continue to make that case for proper support.
Shall I just add, Jen, to your question? I mean, absolutely to agree with Richard. No, we're not saying that we will turn away. The problem we have, though, is the Home Office have in recent times broken commitments that they made to us a number of years ago, which I think you might remember when there was a focus on all of this, particularly when there was a Home Affairs Select Committee inquiry a couple of years ago. We had a commitment from the then Home Secretary that the numbers being dispersed to Greater Manchester would be brought back to a proportionate level, given the size of Greater Manchester. That hasn't happened. Secondly, that we wouldn't see spot use of hotel accommodation, which we had seen in the years running up to that time. That has also now been broken. And it feels as though we are back at square one in some ways in our dealings with the Home Office. Very little regard for the wishes of communities. It's not on, basically, in terms of the way that they're working. So the call is, the position is, we will play our part, but it has to be done with a coordinated, sustainable approach where the needs of places are taken into account, and the different routes are seen as one, if you like. There's no point just looking at Afghanistan and not seeing all of the other pressures on areas as well. So the whole picture has to be seen. It has to be coordinated between all government departments. It can't be the case that refugees from some areas attract a higher level of funding than people from other areas. How can that be justified? That's what we're calling for, but also that local authorities now, if they won't step forward, be required to step forward. And I think this is the big thing that has never changed, actually, in all of the years that I've been looking at this issue. It's been done on a voluntary basis. Areas haven't stepped forward. You look at the role that R10 have played over the last 20 years, and I think that's to their great credit. But then you look around not far away, you'll see neighbouring authorities that have taken none. And that isn't right, actually, and that can't continue given the pressures that are going to be on the asylum system in the coming period. So I hope that's clear. It is obviously an issue we approach carefully. We will never play politics with this issue. We're not doing that. I think what we're just calling for is openness, fairness, a sustainable basis on which all of this is to be managed going forward.
Thanks. I'm going to bring in Michael Gaffney. Michael, you should be able to unmute your microphone now if you just say who you are and where you're from.
Hi, Michael Gaffney, Heart and Smooth Radio. A quick one for Sir Richard before you go. You might have seen the remarks from Unison and NHS providers today, sort of ringing the alarm bell on the pressures that the ambulance service in particular are under. From the Greater Manchester perspective, are there worries there, and what does the sort of post-COVID recovery for ambulance services need to look like?
There are concerns, and although I didn't specifically mention the ambulance service, that is under pressure like every other part. That calls are categorised. There is the category ones, that's the response in 10 minutes. They're managing to meet those. Most of the 1 hour response times they're managing to meet. It's the less urgent cases after that where people can be waiting a very, very long time at the moment, and that's is causing real problems. One of the things that has been done there is to put more clinical advice into the call centres to try and manage and deflect cases where there isn't particularly a need for an ambulance. So there is work going on to try and manage that. But yes, it's a real concern, particularly if we ever get into a position that we can't manage properly those really urgent cases. That's not the position at the moment, but there are some non-urgent cases where the waits are really at completely unacceptable levels.
Thanks, Richard. I think if colleagues have any other questions they'd like to ask to either Andy or Richard, please could you put your hand up now. While we're waiting, I've got a question from Kevin Fitzpatrick. It's been emailed in. It's directed to Andy. Andy, MPs are being recalled tomorrow to Parliament. What should they do? What can they or the government do given the Afghan crisis? And also, what is your reaction to the new Chief Constable dropping the citizens' contract and describing it as complete tosh and patronising? That's from Kevin Fitzpatrick at Radio Manchester.
So thanks, Kevin. With regard to the recall of Parliament and the debate tomorrow, I think MPs have got to be ready to call for a coordinated approach to this, where the UK, if leadership is not to be coming from the US, well, somebody has to provide leadership. And if that is to be the UK, then so be it. Something has to be done to coordinate a better, to coordinate an international response. We haven't seen any efforts in that respect at all, and that's why what the US president said last night, in my view, was so disappointing. Obviously, this is about the immediate situation, and there is a management of that humanitarian crisis across different countries that I was mentioning before. But I found most disappointing to hear the US president talk about it being never about nation building. Well, I was in Parliament at the time in 2001 when these debates first arose, and yes, of course, it was about stabilising the country from a terrorism point of view originally, but it became about nation building and securing women's rights, human rights more broadly. And I found that a really kind of disappointing comment to hear. And obviously there are economic interventions that can be made. There is, of course, the possibility of military backup coordinated through a number of countries to protect the citizens of Afghanistan who are now at greater risk. There is a crisis here that needs to be managed on a number of levels, and I hope Parliament will rise to the occasion tomorrow. Will recognise the seriousness of what's at stake, recognise the obligations that we have to the Afghan people, and I hope, knowing the UK Parliament as I do, there are moments where it can find its voice and rise to the occasion, and I hope tomorrow is one such. On the second point around the comments from our new Chief Constable, firstly, to say that there isn't a ditching of the policy of a named officer or a police community support officer for wards. In fact, that's going to be strengthened. That's what was being indicated, where we will have senior leadership named as well, so that people can see the people who are dedicated to the policing of their area. And that is very much what the new chief and I have spoken about the need to strengthen, bolster neighbourhood policing going forward. The comment I think was being made in particular reference to the fact that people need not to report everything to the police. And I have a lot of sympathy with what the new chief constable is saying, because we need to get back to a kind of basic level of service where people can have assurance that crimes will be investigated. And what the chief constable has said about household burglary in that respect is very welcome indeed. And I've had concerns about any indication that we start to withdraw policing from investigating certain crimes like shoplifting. That has been a concern expressed to me by a number of the leaders. So I support our new chief constable in putting his stamp on the way he wants to take the service forward. He is very much talking a language of an enhanced service to the public for the funding that they make available to support the recruitment of officers. Of course, we are recruiting more officers this year, so that makes that higher level of service possible. So I fully support the direction in which the chief constable is taking the force.
Thanks, Andy. We currently don't have anyone with their hands up, so if I could just ask colleagues in the media, if they do want to ask a question, if they could put their hands up now. If we don't have any hands up in the next kind of few seconds, I think we will finish early. I have no questions on a postcard at the moment. So, yep, no, we've got no further questions from colleagues in the media at the moment. So I think we will. I'll give them one more chance just to hit the raised hand function, because I don't want anyone going away unhappy.
Ross, does it? So
nope, I think that's us.
Yeah, thanks to you, Ross. Thanks, Richard, for coming as well. And thanks, everybody. We just wanted you to have an update, a chance to see the figures and just to see where things are. So I'm glad you've attended, and obviously useful to be able to update you on the latest position vis-a-vis Afghanistan as well. So thanks for attending, everybody, and we will see you soon.